Okay, so here we go. I'm going to just do a quick little demo of this pinch pot method to make some cups. And everyone's going to have a bag of clay in class, but I'm just going to pull just off a little bit of hunk and just kind of get it into a ball in my hands. Maybe kind of smack it back and forth a little bit. And get it, fairly close to a ball shape, sphere shape, whatever you have. Maybe the size of like a good mandarin orange to a regular orange size. You don't want to be too big or too small, because again, we want to be in that 4-inch range. But also doesn't need to be perfectly smooth, perfectly circular, or anything like that, because this whole process is going to change the clay. It's in a really malleable state right now. So while it's so soft like this, we can't really deal with imperfections and things like that. I'll talk a bit about that more. Right now we just want to kind of focus on, again, kind of that process of making the shape of these cups and mugs. So again, with that ball of clay in my hand, I'm just going to push my thumb down into the bottom. And then I want to be careful that I don't go all the way through to the bottom. One thing we have to worry about with clay is thickness. We don't want to be too thick. We don't want to be too thin. If we're too thick, things can crack or just be too heavy to use, especially since we're here making cups and mugs right now. If we make something really thick and heavy, then you don't want to put something in it and then actually drink out of it. And if it's too thin, it can just be really hard to work with. It can warp, again, it can crack, things like that. You might find that as you're putting your thumb through that you put your thumb all the way through. The clay right now is so soft, you can just pinch that back together and smooth that out, and it'll be like it never happened. So now I just kind of have this real thick, kind of tubular shape, and now I just want to, like the name of it says, pinch the clay in between. I'm going to use my thumb on the inside and my fingers on the outside, and I'm just going to pinch them together. As I pinch, I'm just going to spin this ball of clay around. I'm going to feel it as I'm pinching. I'll start feeling the clay actually getting thinner. And I can work my way up to make this taller. And again, all this sort of cracking and tearing is kind of happening right now, and that's okay. That's all fixable. But I don't want to focus on that at the moment. Right now, I just want to focus on getting this to pinch up vertically. Because again, we're making cups, we're not making bowls, so we don't want to go wide. We got to get into that 4-inch range. And so as I pinch up, as I find it getting thinner, I can start pinching at higher points. Okay. And again, this rim's getting a little cracked, but that's okay. I can deal with that later. So now I have kind of this general, again, kind of shape. Let's see. We're just at the 4-inch mark. I can pinch this a little higher to get that a little closer. One thing we find out with clay pretty soon, and as it dries, again, I mentioned the other day, it's all filled with water. As it dries, that's going to cause it to shrink as that moisture dissipates. And then as it goes in the kiln, it's going to shrink again. So, we're making something that's 4 inches now. When it comes out the kiln, it might be closer to 3 1/4, give or take. We did the math. So next thing I want to do is, technically we could just leave it like this. It's a cup. You could hold it, you could drink out of it, you could fill it. But again, this rim, so when I talk about the rim, this is the rim. Not very appetizing as far as trying to drink out of, right? A little inconsistent. The bottom or the foot could be a little smoothed out. These sides could be smoothed out. Some of this texture sometimes can be interesting on the outside, but this texture on the inside we want to get rid of because we want to have a nice, smooth, clean surface. Hanging up in the ceramic studio, there's a bunch of paddles, wooden paddles. And I can use this to just gently try and make this form a little bit more even, a little bit more symmetrical. We won't get rid of that kind of roughness yet, but again, will kind of help even things out. I feel like a little bit more even of a surface. Sorry, that kind of starts changing the form quite a bit already. And so for this rim, I'm going to grab a sponge, get it a little bit wet, and just very gently get this a little bit wet. I can pinch in the areas that are starting to crack apart. Now, I don't need to add a whole lot of water to these areas. Adding water is actually going to make the clay weaker. So we don't want to add any water if we don't have to. So right now I've got that mostly put back together there on the rim. And I'm going to go ahead and start smoothing out the inside because the inside is pretty rough and I want that to be smooth. So in your toolkit you'll find some ribs like this. This is the metal rib and this is really good. It's nice and flexible. There'll also be a wooden one like this that you can use inside of here, but it's not as flexible, so I don't like it as much for this. And I'm just going to very gently start using this rib against that interior surface. Try and smooth it out. So the clay is really soft right now, really fragile. So as I'm smoothing out on the inside, notice how my opposite hand is cupping the clay from the outside. And that's to help make it sure that I don't alter the form any more than I want to. So I can just pick this up in my hand, start smoothing this out. Instead of using my rib down on the bottom, I'm going to use my finger because this is pretty narrow down on the bottom. I'm just going to push out with my finger, kind of rubbing around the inside to help make this a little bit wider. There we go, kind of like that. So it's getting smoother. Then I'm going to have to use my fingers down all the way in the bottom just because of how far the rib works down. And again, I'm just spinning the cup lightly, making sure to secure it from the outside. Okay, so that's getting smoother in there. So one thing that we're going to find as we try to smooth things is that as soon as we try to smooth one area with our hand, with our rib, kind of what have you, is that we're going to kind of misshape or unsmooth an area kind of right by it because the clay is so soft. So we kind of have to work in these in stages. So right now, again, this is in the greenware stage. This is what we call the wet clay stage because the clay is really wet. Here in a little while, this will be in the leather hard stage. Like right now, I can do this. It's really flexible, which means it's really hard to clean up certain things or make attachments for feet or for handles. So here in a moment, I'm gonna have to let this sit to dry out a little bit. So first I do wanna clean up some of this outside cracking. And again, I'm just gonna use my metal rib for this. Can support it with my hand on the inside. And again, as I'm doing this, because the clay's so wet, again, I'm not adding any water. The clay is more than moist enough right now. To just blend back together. Sometimes these areas on the rim, because the rim's going to dry out a little bit more, need a little bit of water. But again, I can just dab it on with my hands. I don't really want to you know, flood this thing with water. So there's kind of a little tear and a low spot there, so I'm just going to take a little bit of clay and fill that in. Like so. And then I'm going to do that same thing up on this rim on the inside. Again, we want to make our rims really nice and sharp, or nice and thin. Again, kind of when we looked at like diner mugs the other day, you know, if they get too thick, they're going to dribble poorly. So right now this rim's a little bit uneven, and that's okay with me. But you might not like that. So I'm just going to come back to the rim with the sponge again. So this rim still needs a little bit of attention. There we go. As far as getting it even, but I'm gonna let this set up for a little bit, so I can do that in a more efficient way. Because again, this is really soft right now. If I try and do too much cleanup, it's not gonna be that effective. So this is part one of as many as it takes.